Chapter 13. Castle Food for Thought. Caden stared at the empty balcony and shifted from foot to foot. Should he go after Valerius, or stay here? The white dragon spirit rustled its wings, and he knew that it wanted to fly. It wanted to show him the glories of sailing through the clouds and how the moonlight would shatter on its translucent scales. It wanted him to experience skimming over dark forests and silvered fields. Anyone who was out would see a shadow pass over them and look up, not to see a cloud, but them flying by. They would point in amazement. Caden actually did take a step towards the balcony, an itching feeling in his skin to become a dragon. Would it actually be that easy to shed his human form and become something giant yet sleek? Something scaled instead of smooth-skinned. Something that could breathe ice. A shiver of excitement went through Caden as, for the first time really, he thought about the good aspects of being a dragon shifter. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad if he had to shift, though the white dragon spirit seemed to have no desire to take over, and he had been pretty emotional with Valerius.
Really, should we go get him?
He asked the spirit.
Running away from stuff is not good, but he's on edge as well. Maybe he just needs to blow off some steam.
Raziel is ascendant,
the spirit replied, and offered him the unsettling image of glowing red eyes suddenly appearing above them on the mountain, before a gout of fire erupted from a cavernous mouth filled with sharp teeth.
Okay, we're definitely staying inside then.
While he had talked tough about Raziel and Valerius simply accepting him and his spirit remaining in reach, that had been a lot easier to do in the comfy space of Valerius's quarters, and not out under the cold, hard moon.
But Valerius needs us, doesn't he? That's how I felt when he was losing it. I could almost touch what was wrong.
The spirit did not answer, merely lowered its head beneath one wing and stretched out a clawed leg, rather cat-like. He wouldn't have been surprised if the white dragon spirit had started licking itself, but it just settled in his chest. He was about to ask it more about Valerius and itself, when his stomach growled and he nearly hunched forward with a hunger cramp.
food, family,
The spirit suggested.
Good ideas both. Damn, they must be so scared for me.
So Caden turned and went back to the doors of Valerius's quarters. He paused there, hands on the door handles, and looked back. He liked this place. It was comfortable and warm. The books everywhere gave Caden a sense that Valerius had a deep inner life. He found it easy to imagine being curled up on the couch, a book in his hands, staring into the fire. An unexpected additional image crept in at that moment, of a muscular arm sliding around his shoulders at a firm chest to rest his head on. He felt a kiss on his forehead and the slight scratch of a bearded jaw.
Valerius.
He blinked rapidly and shook himself. Not only was such an idea crazy, it was ludicrous. Valerius didn't even want him in the same city as he was, let alone in his arms. And then there was Raziel, who wanted to burn him and his spirit to a crisp. Yeah, the idea of a romantic relationship between them was absurd.
And I don't even like him. I mean, he's not my type. He tried to kill me. What? Why are you looking at me like that?
The last was said to his spirit, who was actually arching an eyebrow. He didn't think dragons had eyebrows or could arch them like that with so much meaning.
It would be like me suggesting you like Raziel, and you don't, because it was mean to you. Murderous.
He suggested. His spirit, though, just went back to that cat-like stretching and extending its toes. He shook his head. Maybe dragons thought it was a form of courtship to have another dragon try and immolate them. But Caden was not into men who barked at him, scowled, and insisted he was a nuisance. With that firm thought, he pushed the doors open and walked outside into the foyer. Luckily, his parents had not gone far. In fact, they were all arguing not 20 feet down the hallway. Mr. Storn was in mid-sentence. "And that is why the law is beyond all of us. Valerius might be the strongest, but the law, at its highest purpose, is to make sure that the weakest among us has the same rights as the strongest." You are in high reach. One of the claw captains, Simi, Caden recalled, answered hotly. King Valerius rules what goes on in this castle and to his people. He is just. He is the law. Arguably, by merging with another dragon spirit, Caden is no longer a citizen of Reach, but one of the world's rulers. He should be treated as such. Mr. Moore snapped.
No longer a citizen of Reach? Screw that. I am too.
But while the Raven shifters argued law, his father's face was red as he tried to push past Captain Ngoy to get back to Valerius's quarters. He shouted, My son is in there with that monster! Let me go! I need to get to my son! Captain Ngoy, though a foot shorter than his father, had no trouble holding him back. She was surprisingly calm, almost kind, as she said firmly,
Your son was clear that he wanted you removed from the room.
Caden also threw himself off the drop to save others. He has a habit of risking himself like that. He's a hero. Even when he was a little boy, he was off trying to save people, animals, even things. That's who he is, his father pointed out. Caden felt a welling of pride that his father thought he was heroic. He'd never heard such a thing from his father before. He had never thought his father believed that of him.
Caden needs our help.
Tilly was tugging at Ngoy's leg, but again the claw captain was unimpressed, but still gentle, holding Tilly back with her other hand.
Councillor Shioni has ordered it. You will remain here where it is safe.
Captain Ngoy said. Shioni, for her part, was trying to herd the unruly group farther and farther away from Valerius's quarters. She kept glancing over her shoulder towards the doors, and as such, she was the first one to see him come out. A wash of relief crossed her delicate, pretty features. That had Caden calling out as he jogged towards them.
Guys, I'm right here. Everything's okay. Dad, Mom, Tilly.
His father's vociferous yelling was cut off, as if a switch had been flipped, and he saw the relief release all the tension in him. Tilly peeled off from the group and raced towards him. He got down on his haunches and grabbed her, lifting her up like he used to when she was much smaller.
I thought I was too big for you to pick me up anymore.
She murmured into his ear as she wrapped her arms around his neck and held on like a limpet.
I'm a little stronger now.
He admitted. Tilly weighed nothing at all.
Maybe a lot stronger.
He met Shioni's gaze as he said the last, and she nodded. She knew how strong he was, and likely many different things about him too. And suddenly he desperately wanted to talk to her about being a shifter, about being a dragon. She was a Sphinx shifter, but she'd been Valerius's counselor since the war. But his father was between the two of them, wrapping his arms around him and Tilly, so it wasn't the time.
Later,
he told himself. Almost as if she heard him, she only gave a faint nod.
Hey, Dad, I'm okay.
He repeated. Your luck is going to run out, my crazy son. First, the drop, and now going up to an enraged dragon shifter? Don't do that again. My heart can't handle it. His father punctuated that with a kiss on his temple and a bone-crushing hug. Or it would have been bone-crushing except for the fact that Caden was so much stronger now.
There wasn't any danger,
he said. His father and sister gave him twin, "Are you crazy?" looks.
Guys, I know what I'm doing.
He insisted. But did he? Why should he be at all sure that the Black Dragon King wouldn't turn on him like before? But he hadn't been afraid when he'd gone up to Valerius this time. It had seemed the natural thing to do.
I have never seen a dragon quite like Caden before,
Shioni said, coming over to them.
He definitely has a calming influence on Valerius. Perhaps the ice truly does triumph over fire. I wouldn't say that around Valerius. He's a little touchy about that,
he told her with a snort of laughter. The two claw captains didn't seem to like it much either. They looked at each other with raised eyebrows. Valerius was the only dragon they thought mattered, and a little white dragon like Caden could never best him. Caden agreed with them. He then noticed that his mom was hanging back. She'd done the same thing in Valerius's rooms, but he'd figured she was overwhelmed by being in the Black Dragon King's presence. Valerius was, after all, the top of the pantheon for the faith, but she was still staying away, and Valerius was not there. For a moment, his stomach tumbled as he worried she might be rejecting him like Rose claimed all of his family would do. But Rose had been wrong about the others. The moment he'd seen his dad and Tilly's faces, he'd known that they still loved him like always. But did his mom? He reached towards her.
Mom,
He said, and waggled his fingers to try and lure her near as if she were a frightened wild animal. She came to him and took his hand, slowly, reverently, and held it between hers.
are you all right, Caden? You look, it is true.
She let out an uncertain laugh.
Shifters have a glow. You have a glow. Mom, I was the white dragon shifter earlier today. You didn't notice a glow then, did you? It's still me. Still your Caden that works at Wally's and doesn't have a clue about what he's doing with his life.
He said with a rather hapless smile.
Don't let your beliefs get in the way of what's true.
She blinked and looked down.
I didn't see it earlier because I wouldn't let myself see you as anything other than my son. I did notice something, but I couldn't. I never thought that the spirits would touch our family, but I was wrong, so wrong about that. I am still your son. That hasn't changed, really.
His voice dropped off. She wasn't listening. Or maybe it was more like she wasn't hearing him. He'd have to work on this. He noticed that Tilly and his father were sharing a look as he and his mom talked. Clearly they were not happy with her reaction, but his mother had always been hard to reach sometimes. A little different than them, since they were so emotive and she simply wasn't. It made him love her just a little harder, because he knew that she couldn't show how much she loved them all back. He was distracted by these thoughts when his father began touching him. Searching for wounds, he realized after a moment, and he quickly shook his father's hands off, but gently.
Dad, I'm fine.
He met his father's eyes.
I know Valerius seemed scary, but he wasn't going to hurt me. I can't exactly say his bark is worse than his bite, but what happened earlier today is sort of complicated. It's not who he is. I wasn't in any danger.
Are you so sure about that, young man? Mr. Moore asked, his bright, bird-like eyes glittering in the low light of the hallway.
Yeah, I'm sure.
From what I can see, Caden, you are a kind young person who hasn't yet seen much of the world, and shifter politics at this level. Mr. Storn and Mr. Moore looked at each other with raised eyebrows. Well, let's just say that it's a blood sport on the best of days. Your very existence means that some portion of Valerius's territory must be ceded to you.
No, it doesn't.
Caden frowned.
Why are you all talking like you know what I want? Besides, if I'm too naive, and that's what you're saying, let's be honest, about how shifter politics work, how do you expect me to rule my own territory?
Mr. Moore lifted a long finger into the air. Ah, that is what counselors are for, aren't they, Counselor Shione?
Shione is already Valerius' counselor, so she's not available,
Caden said, though he knew that that was not what Mr. Moore had meant. She only smiled and dipped her head.
I have been known to advise King Valerius, but I assure you that I do not make his decisions for him. I would not presume to do so.
Indeed not. If his behavior earlier is any indication, he's ruled more by his emotions than logic. But that's just the way it is with certain shifters, Mr. Storn said superiorly, as opposed to raven shifters that always think they're the smartest people in the room. Simi hissed. We follow the facts, even if they lead to uncomfortable places, such as this one where I would question the judgment of anyone who would put a snake in charge of his guards. Mr. Storn sniffed, brushing invisible dirt off of his shoulders. Simi lunged towards the raven shifter, stopping just short of Mr. Storn's face. They were eye to eye. For one moment, Caden expected a forked tongue to slither out or fangs to come down dripping with venom. Mr. Storn just sniffed some more, as if Simi smelled unpleasant, and that was as much attention as he was going to give him. King Valerius sees the truth of people, Simi growled. Or He knows that giving a little wretch like yourself a false sheen of respectability by making you a guard captain will keep you loyal and give all the others hope. Mr. Storm replied, "You son of a bitch."
When people find our free audio stories on Spotify or YouTube, they often ask, how is something with the high quality of Edward Fox still free? Well, the answer is, it isn't. I and my team are supported by memberships. I run my own private website, wraithrain.com. On this website, I've published gay romance, written stories, manga, and now uncensored podcasts since 2010. It's like my own version of Patreon, which I started because at that time, Patreon didn't exist. If you love this podcast and want to support the creation of more like it, consider joining us as a member and getting access to exclusive members-only stories. I'll tell you how to sign up and what you'll get at the end of this chapter. Gentlemen, such words are in no one's best interest.
Shione interjected smoothly. Her tawny-colored eyes glowed.
Captain Simi, our guests may not share our views on the world, may even say rude things, but they are our guests. We will treat them as such. Freedom of speech is a cornerstone of King Valerius's territory, unlike in other places in the world.
Understood, madam, Simi answered. Simi slowly stepped back. A shuttered expression fell over his face, shutting away the anger. Mr. Storm's eyes narrowed, as if he didn't quite trust this new calmness in Simi. But the claw captain stood straight and rigid and studiously ignored the raven shifters.
I wonder if Rose knows that Valerius allows snake shifters in the claw. They're supposed to all be thugs, not capable of following the law, let alone enforcing it. But Valerius clearly doesn't think that's true.
But he could just imagine the bee shifter's expression as he told her about Simi.
Rose would likely just claim he was a token.
You seek to remind us that if we were under King Alarian's rule, we would not have the freedom to criticize him, yes? Mr. Moore said, taking his glasses off and polishing them. You hope that we will judge King Valerius less harshly because of this?
Not in the least,
she said.
I merely am making a statement of fact. You are fond of facts, as you just said.
Caden had to repress a grin. She had turned what the raven shifters had said against them. He knew that they were supposed to be representing him, but he was glad to see them put in their places. And that was when he realized that if they were representing him, then maybe he should speak up about how he felt about a snake shifter being a member of the Claw.
I just want to say,
he began and cleared his throat, suddenly nervous when all eyes were on him.
I think it's great that Captain Simi is a claw captain. The type of shifter you are shouldn't put you in a box. It's wrong. I'm glad Valerius sees that.
Neither Mr. Storm nor Mr. Moore seemed upset at his position, but instead their expressions appeared intrigued. If that's the kind of rule of law in the territory you want, Caden, that's very admirable, Mr. Moore said. Caden opened his mouth to say he didn't want a territory for the final time when Shione spoke up.
I think Caden's earlier suggestion that we get some food and drink is a good one. Why don't we take this discussion to the private dining room off of the kitchens? Captain Nagoye, would you lead the way?
The Claw captain nodded and began to lead the group to the staircase that Valerius and Caden had ascended not all that long ago.
Great, more stairs. At least we're going down.
The two raven shifters followed directly after her, conferring with each other while Caden and his family were in the middle, and Captain Simi brought up the rear. They were as much being accompanied as guarded on their way to the kitchens. Shione stepped in line beside Caden.
Where is King Valerius?
She asked him quietly.
He's flying right now.
Caden answered as evenly as he could.
I think he needed some time alone. He's really not one for a lot of people, is he?
She shook her head and smiled.
Unfortunately, with the anniversary celebration and all that's gone on today, he hasn't had much time to himself, except for when he took to the skies. But even then, he knows everyone's gaze is upon him. It makes him grumpy. He was going to shift into his dragon form in his quarters.
Tilly said, very astutely.
If he'd done that, we'd all have been squished, Till, and he wouldn't want to squish us.
Caden lied and touched her nose to get her to laugh. But though she did laugh, her face soon sobered.
I think he wouldn't have minded squishing some people.
She pointed out. His father's expression was still grimmer. I don't want you anywhere near him, Caden. He's made his intentions quite clear with that battle this afternoon.
He thought I was responsible for the bomb, Dad. He didn't know that I became a dragon shifter because I tried to save everybody.
He answered.
You did not try to save everyone, Caden.
His mother corrected. She was walking alongside his father, but he noticed that they were careful not to look at one another and they didn't touch. Some simmering emotion was between them, and Caden feared he was the root cause of it.
You did save everyone, and in doing so, a spirit
Ellen,
found you worthy.
Let's not discuss worthiness now and all of that. We don't want our son to be encouraged to do any more heroic acts today, his father said with a scowl.
What Caden does or does not do is now determined by the spirits, not us.
She said simply.
Our son is not just ours any longer.
Caden wanted to object to that, but maybe it was true. She had been right about how the spirit had chosen him earlier today. Valerius, though, was confused why a dragon spirit would be drawn to such an act of sacrifice. But Caden wasn't. His impression of the white dragon spirit was that it was kind and protective, though when he compared it to Raziel, he sort of got Valerius's point. Even his own understanding of the other dragons was that they were creatures made for war, for ultimate destruction. The white dragon spirit was not like that. He observed it now. It was curled up, tail tucked around its massive body, its head under its right wing. But all he said in response to his mother's observations and his father's look of disbelief was,
I haven't suddenly become wise or mystic overnight, you guys. It's still me. And I want what I've always wanted, which is the life I've got.
Tilly, who seemed to weigh nothing in his arms, was frowning at him.
You're still going to work at the souvenir shop, even though you're the white dragon shifter? Nobody's going to know I'm the white dragon shifter. I'll just be Caden Bryce.
He told her.
But Wally will totally want to capitalize on what you are.
Tilly pointed out.
I bet he's been planning out what white dragon souvenirs he'll sell already.
Caden laughed.
Wally will make plenty of white dragon souvenirs, but he won't tell anyone it's me.
Tilly just rolled her eyes, as if she couldn't believe how innocent he was if he thought that.
You stated several times that you want your life back.
She only remarked quietly.
Yeah, I do.
But here's the thing, son. The best way to ensure that is for people to know exactly who you are, so that King Valerius can't take any negative actions against you, his father said.
Dad, he's not going to...
People love dragons, Caden. They already love the white dragon. People are already talking about how you saved everyone in Dragon Strike Square. So if people know that you are the white dragon, they won't want anything to happen to you. And if King Valerius wants to keep the illusion that the dragons are the great and wise rulers of the world, and not simply beasts, he'll have to play along with that, his father said firmly. That will keep you safe.
But Dad, if people know what I am, then how am I going to live my life? Everybody is going to be coming to me, wanting something. I'll never be able to just be me.
Caden pointed out, anxiety spiking in his blood.
I tend to agree with your father, Caden.
Shione said unexpectedly.
The idea that you can keep yourself a secret is a vain one. People will find out who you are in time. Better if you plan how you want that information revealed than have the choice taken away from you. But you don't think that Valerius is going to harm me?
Caden pointed out.
There's a natural order to the universe.
His mother said.
Another dragon coming into this world has meaning, Caden. It's not a coincidence that it happened. It's not simply a fluke that you were chosen. This was all meant. And a dragon has responsibilities. Don't you think so, Shione?
Ellen.
Yes, I do.
Shione interrupted his father.
Responsibilities? Like ruling a part of the world? Neither me nor my spirit want that.
Caden insisted.
I'm feeling like a broken record here, as no one seems to remember that. What does your spirit want?
Shioni asked, just as they stopped in front of a set of doors, beyond which was the sound of clinking of pots and pans, the sizzling of meat, and the hissing of sautéing.
Right now, food and sleep, and not necessarily in that order. The spirit inside of me is not a warrior. It's sort of cute.
Caden admitted with a shamefaced smile.
It looked cute on the net.
Tilly agreed.
I totally want a white dragon plushie.
Caden remembered then how just earlier that day, before all of this had happened, he'd wanted to bring her a black one, and she'd called him a dork. That seemed like centuries ago now.
I know it might have looked all dramatic and stuff when Valerius and I battled earlier,
Caden finally said.
but honestly, it was just luck I got away from him.
Shioni nodded as Captain Ngoy opened the doors to a massive kitchen. At first, all Caden could see were flames and steam and people in white coats rushing about. A million different smells emanated from the space, all of them tasty. And the white dragon spirit immediately came awake again. Sleepy blue eyes became alert. A tongue slid out of an eager mouth. Caden's stomach growled audibly. Tilly laughed. "Caden! Tilly! We're over here!" It was Wally calling to them, waving his pudgy hands in the air. He and Landry were seated at a giant table that was already groaning with food. Caden saw a whole roast turkey with all the trimmings, from creamy mashed potatoes to green beans with almonds to tart cranberry sauce. There was also an entire roast beef glistening with juice. 2 roast chickens, one stuffed with rice and the other with cornbread, were beside it. Platters of asparagus with yellow hollandaise sauce sat beside baskets full of fresh rolls that were still steaming. And that was only half of what was on the table. Wally and Landry had their plates loaded with food, but it didn't look like they had touched what was there. Moving unconsciously, Caden set Tilly down before he strode over to the table and grabbed one of the turkey legs in a free hand and pulled it off. He brought it up to his lips and started to devour it, juices oozing down his chin. Tilly's laughter was the only thing that had him coming back to himself. Everyone was staring at him. He chewed and swallowed the large bite he had taken and said rather sheepishly,
I'm really hungry.
"That is normal for a new shifter," Mr. Moore said with an indulgent smile, as if Caden had performed a neat trick by simply eating.
We didn't think we were going to see you for a while.
Landry said, casting suspicious glances at the 2 raven shifters. She was undoubtedly feeling ill at ease being one of the few humans in the place.
Yeah, but King Valerius needed some time alone, so we've decided to join you here.
He lied. He didn't want to go into everything that happened again. Landry's extreme dislike for shifters might be pushed over the edge, even if she did seem to be making an exception for him. Wally patted the seat beside him. "You sit here, Caden. I got the best food near me. We'll share." While Wally was tiny, he could eat his weight in food 10 times over. Caden was always amazed at how he could inhale sandwiches and ice cream and potato salad and pasta and corn dogs or whatever was put in front of him in a bite or 2. Wally was not fussy about his victuals. He hated the very idea of any food going to waste, so he always managed to put most of it away himself. Caden sat down beside him and Tilly took a seat on the other side of him. He continued to gnaw on his turkey leg even as the others took their positions around the table. Captain Ngoy and Simi kept standing, moving so their backs were against the wall and their eyes towards the entrance. His father and mother sat beside his sister, though that distance continued between them. Shioni sat opposite him, while the raven shifters perched beside her. Silence fell as plates were handed out and people dug into the amazing meal. Caden was glad. He knew there was a lot of talking to be done, but he needed food and quiet. Wine and juice were passed around, with Tilly even being given a little red wine after the day she'd had. Caden's interest was mostly in the food. He was having trouble not simply grabbing the entire turkey and swallowing it whole like an anaconda, but he forced himself to use his fork and knife and take bites that he actually chewed before swallowing them. No one else even attempted to get a slice of that delectable white meat. He was pretty sure he growled at Wally when the little man tried to snatch a piece of skin. And for a moment, when everyone was eating the good food and he had his family and friends around him, none of which were acting strangely or not strangely for them, Caden felt a sense of peace. He'd been so scared all day about what everyone's reaction to the news was going to be, and it was mostly good. It was far better than he'd hoped, or Rose had guessed. He couldn't wait to tell her about how she'd been wrong. Maybe he could convince Wally to give her a job, so she wouldn't have to work for Marben. His mother was always going on about her garden. Maybe Rose would be willing to shift and pollinate her plants. That would probably be weird to ask her to do. Definitely weird, he decided, but he might just do it anyway. And then there was Valerius. The man was interesting. Not what he thought he would be at all. Not snotty like the Raven shifters, but pretty human, considering how old he was and how powerful. He was almost understandable. Caden wouldn't mind talking to him more. Maybe Valerius would talk to him about all the secrets of being a dragon shifter, and his happy thoughts were derailed as both claw captains heard something over their earpieces and stiffened.
What is it?
She only asked, but then she was looking down at her phone and let out a soft curse.
What's wrong?
Caden asked. Wally grunted. He saw something on his phone too, which meant it was beyond castle channels.
How did you hide that phone? I took one off you already.
She only narrowed her eyes at Wally. Always carry a spare. That's my motto. Turning from her to Caden, he said, It's good I did, because it looks like some people are threatening to storm the castle, unless the White Dragon Shifter reveals themselves.
What else do you get as a member of WraithRain.com besides the unedited audio versions of Everdark, Dragon's Reign, and the Sexy Times for Empire of Stars? I write a lot of stories, far more than Dragon's Reign and Everdark. Since 2010, I've written long gay romance web novels with hot heroes falling in love with each other, whether it's honorable elven warriors, fierce dragon shifters, sensual mermen, fallen angels and demons, and reincarnated immortal vampires. When you join, you can read all of these on my serial membership site. The completed stories are there in full for you to read as fast as you want. And the ongoing stories get 3 chapters every week, so I can torture you with cliffhangers. Entertain you. But don't worry, you can tell me exactly what you think of that in the comments at the end of every chapter. As a member, you can be in my own personal peanut gallery. There's also manga. My first foray into romance was actually yaoi manga. And since the very beginning, I've collaborated with artists to create both Western and Asian graphic novels that are posted 1 page at a time in the members-only area. Even if you're not a manga person per se, when you're a member, you get them free. So why not check out the amazing detailed work of our artists while waiting for me to post the next chapter? If this sounds interesting to you, try us out for a month. The link to sign up is in the notes. The most you'll pay is $9.95 a month, and you'll be directly supporting us, real people, not big corporations like Amazon or Netflix, not content created with AI. Wraith Rain is a small team of actual humans doing the best we can to transport you with romantic action and adventure stories. We really thank you for your support.